today, Democratic Congressman Heath Shuler is a member of the Blue Dog Coalition. He's a co-author of a letter which was signed by 100 House members. We're also joined by Republican Congressman Tom Rooney, one of the signers. I don't know whether you guys were able to hear what Steve Forbes was saying, but it's all over the papers today, that instead of going big, it almost looks like some sleight of hand, some voodoo type, I hate to use the term voodoo economics, but it doesn't look like it's going big except for maybe gimmickry.
Well, I certainly hope that that's not the case. That's why Tom and others we have all signed a letter asking the super committee to go big. And now when you have not only bipartisan but in a bicameral way, some 150 members of Congress who want to see action with the super committee to go big, just don't kick the can down the road. We have seen that far too often in Washington. Time is of the essence, and we must get the deal done quickly.
Congressman Rooney?
Yeah, I hope Mr. Forbes is wrong. I mean, I haven't seen the articles that he's talking about, but certainly I've talked to members of the super committee just last night, and from what they've told me to my face, they don't know that a deal is done or a deal is dead yet. They're working very hard. And for me, that sits on the Armed Services Committee, not coming up with a deal will be catastrophic for our defense apparatus. And, it's just something that we hopefully we won't get to.
You've got, we just framed the debate. You've got the Democrats and the president. It's very difficult to go to his base and ask to cut these entitlements to the extent that they need to be cut before this election. And then you got the Grover Norquist pledgers on the other side. That's what we're talking about, isn't it? Where is there room for compromise, Congressman Shuler?
Well, I think there is room for compromise.
Where?
You've now seen 150 members sign this, but the most important thing is if the Democrats want to hold on to entitlements, you must reform it. If not, we'll lose it altogether. Just taking consideration.
Well, you're talking like a blue dog now, Congressman. You're not talking like I don't know what color are the other dogs.
Well, if the interest rate goes up 1%, that adds another $160 billion of expense to our government. That's going to be taken right away from our seniors, both Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. We can't continue down the path that we're on. We're going to spend our way out of all the entitlement programs, so you have to reform it.
Well, and the other thing I would say is that the president and the speaker this summer almost came to a deal like Heath and I are talking about. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that Democrats and Republicans both recognize that when you have a gridlock Congress, this is the opportunity to do the big things like we did in the 90s with welfare reform and the 80s with tax reform. If we miss this opportunity and wait until the next election, like Mr. Forbes alludes to, it may or may not happen. These are the opportunities where you have a divided Congress to do the big things. If we miss this chance, we'll be in election season. Our approval ratings will drop from 9% to whatever, and it'll just be campaign season again.
Congressman Steve Forbes here. In terms of earlier in the year, Paul Ryan came up with a substantive proposal. Agree or disagree with it? It was a serious proposal on Medicare, and the response of the White House was to give a green light to running ads of a look-alike of Ryan throwing grandma off a cliff. How can you make sure that the White House is really serious about it? Because every time the GOP puts its head up, it gets whacked big time.
Well, I think the most important thing is to show bipartisan support and a bicameral support that we are serious about making real reforms in both Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and tax reform. In order to do that, we have to continue our message and get out front of this and work in a bipartisan way. It's time for the real statesman to step forward. We have had enough of this bipartisan.
Is a statesman in the White House? Is a statesman in the White House?
We can push. I certainly think that we do have a statesman in the White House, because at the end of the day, we will help push that over the top when we have so much support both in the House and in the Senate. If we would have just done what Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson had suggested, or what the Gang of Six had suggested, we would be far past that. But unfortunately, we have too many people that want to play politics in Washington, and I think Tom and I, we've had enough of the politics. We're ready to get to real work here in Washington.
Not to belabor it, but Simpson Bowles, the White House could have embraced it in January and chose not to do so. What makes you think they're going to change now?
That was a failure. We should have embraced it, both the House, but it was still political. Inside Washington, it was still political. You didn't have no one willing to step forward. I'm willing to sacrifice my next election based upon doing what's right for the American people. My job is not as important as what we can do for the American people. And if it means giving up this position in Washington for doing what is right and let all the pundits come after us, then so be it. The most important thing we can do is what's right for our generation today, but also that next generation, Tom and I's kids.
Yeah, you got 99 people that agree with Heath, and if the president or the my party's leadership decides to disregard it just for political gain, then maybe the approval rating is correct. Unfortunately,
Congressman Rooney, what taxes would you suggest you would allow to be raised? What would you be comfortable with for on the revenue side of things? What should we do?
We've talked about all summer, from the deal that the president and the speaker were talking about, the idea that Paul Ryan was talking about earlier, closing the loopholes, bringing down the corporate tax structure, so we have a flatter, fairer tax, as Mr. Ford used to talk about. But when you close those loopholes, increase the revenues, then you can talk about entitlement reform. I mean, that's the stuff that we should at least be able to agree on, those things, and how big we can get from there. Hopefully, we say go big.
Congressman Shuler, I think that was put forward a couple of weeks ago, and actually some guys on the Democratic side walked out on getting rid of the loophole. What was it? It was $300 billion. It was a start, but it got absolutely nowhere.
Well, obviously, when the president and the speaker was at $800 billion and you want to start at $300 billion, that's unacceptable. I mean, Tom and I, we've looked at all the different proposals. We can come up with $4 trillion pretty simple. I mean, you can get, Tom Coburn said it just this week. We got $1 trillion just in tax loopholes, and then you add back mortgage deduction and you add back to charitable contributions. You're still at $1 trillion in revenues, and then you get some $2 or $3 trillion more in reforms and entitlements.
It's so tough to watch. What you mentioned when we were at 800, and you wonder whether that was really something the president was willing to do, because the word was he went back and needed another 50% more to $1.2 trillion after he spoke to to former Speaker Pelosi and the rest of the Democrats. And so you wonder. You say we got close to a grand deal. There's people that say neither side was ever really ready to go.
Well, I think the most important thing you can look at today is now that you have quit listening to the leadership. I mean, that is as partisan as it gets. You have the ranking file members standing forward, being true statesmen. We're trying to lead the way, push the others out of the way, let us lead the way, let us get it to a compromise. Let the world is watching, America is watching. It's time for real statesmen to step forward.
Could the 100 of you get together with the Gang of Six from the Senate and
Tom
make something happen?
Tom and I worked with a group within the House for months now, and that's the reason this letter came forward. It was through our efforts and working with our colleagues. We have been working with the Gang of Six. We met last week, and we will have, obviously, from that conversation, the press conference that we'll have today is based upon that meeting.
Good.
Congressman Rooney, a quick question. The worst comes to worst, and the committee doesn't come to an agreement. Is there support in the House to pass a special bill to make sure our military's not cut to pieces?
We haven't even gotten there yet. I mean, Buck McKeon, who's the chairman of the Armed Services, is trying to make sure that the troops are rallied around the fact that we won't get to sequestration. If that happens, I mean, we can talk about it, but the president's been clear, if we try to monkey with sequestration at all, that he's not going to go for it. So, let's try to make this successful before, once you start talking about Plan B, all of a sudden Plan B becomes, the plan. And we don't want to go there right now. We have to get this done.
It's nice seeing you guys just standing next to each other. We appreciate it, Congressman Shuler. Congressman Rooney, it's good. All right.